Have you ever trusted someone so deeply only to find out they betrayed you the worst way? That's precisely what happened to me. I felt we had a strong marriage until I discovered my wife was cheating. But it didn't end there. The guy she strayed with duped her and took her for everything, and when the truth was revealed, she was left with nothing but debt. So what did I do? I walked away with no aid or support. I wouldn't clean up her mess after what she did. She made her own decisions and is now dealing with the repercussions. This is my story of treachery, karma, and regaining control of my life. Let me tell you how it all went down. I'm 33 years old, and my ex-wife, who is 3 years younger, still tries to insinuate herself into my life at every opportunity. Let us call her Darcy. I'm done with it, and this is how I put it out there for good. Once this is public, I intend to seek a restraining order in court. I simply need to move on and be done with her stalking me and popping up whenever she feels like it. Darcy and I met a few years back while working remotely on a branding assignment. My duty was to build profiles for everyone involved, so I DM'd her to deliver her the finished design I had created for her. She loved it, appreciated my work, and was extremely friendly from the start, so we naturally continued talking. Then, one day she called me unexpectedly, claiming she was going to my city for work and suggesting we meet. I was unmarried at the time and did not expect anything serious, but I was interested. Based on her images, I thought she was attractive, and it would be good to finally meet her in person. I wasn't looking for a relationship, but I wouldn't be upset if one developed. She chose a restaurant, and her talks with Darcy were just as warm and welcoming as they had been in the DMS. Not long after, we began dating. It happened naturally. On one of her beautiful nights in town, I asked her to be my girlfriend. She said yes, and we were official. After dating for just over a year, we decided to marry. I should mention that her family, particularly her mother and sisters, did not like me. They went forward with the marriage, but in many ways they demonstrated that I was too poor for their daughter. These individuals were only slightly higher in social status than I was, but they believed they were superior to me. Financially, things seemed promising. Darcy relocated permanently to my city, and I continued to work as a designer. However, I had secured a higher-paying position. Furthermore, we frequently collaborated on projects because we worked in the same business. It took a while to have a baby, but when we did, it was the best time of our marriage. The baby and Darcy were doing well for around 5 months before Darcy miscarried. I worked remotely, so I was at home when it happened. She was getting ready for work when she suddenly burst out crying in anguish. I was attempting to comfort her when I spotted the blood. Actually, I believe we both saw it at the same time since she immediately began crying. I freaked out and dialed 911 immediately. At the hospital, the doctors informed us that she had miscarried. They stated it was probably because she overworked herself. It was a difficult and terrible moment for both of us, but I convinced her that we would have more children in the future, which we never did. After a while, she appeared to return to her usual self. I did everything I could to make things easier for her. I bought her a new automobile, and we moved into a larger apartment. I also paid for her to develop a professional website, which I designed to assist her with her employment. I also co-paid for her assistance in alleviating her load. It seemed like we were back on track for a time, and everything was going well. Looking back, I'm pleased we didn't have children while married. I understand that sounds horrible, especially after she suffered a miscarriage. Still, I can't help but think it would have made things much more difficult. If we had a child, I would have been overly connected, which would have prevented me from doing what I eventually needed to do. I would not have wanted to hurt my child's mother, as that would have changed everything. For this article, I'll acknowledge something about myself. I have a short temper. Darcy knew I had been like that since we first met. No, my temper was not the source of the difficulties that finally arose. The underlying issue was that she wanted me to believe I had no control. It wasn't about compromise or collaboration anymore. She just needed to establish her individuality in a way that felt like she was proving something. That's when everything began to unravel. Nothing too wild at first, but whenever we fought, Darcy would pack her things and leave to visit with her family. This was new behavior, and the first time it happened, I assumed I had done something very wrong because she had never done anything like that before. I believed I had pushed her too far, so I called her up and apologized, virtually asking her to return home, which she did. But, looking back, what should have troubled me was that her family did not try to send her back, call her right after, or even ask what had occurred. It was as if they were cool with her simply leaving. They didn't like me, so it made sense. And surprisingly, it occurred again. This time, things were worse. Her siblings called to shout at me, stating I wasn't treating their sister correctly. They even blamed me for her miscarriage, which hurt tremendously. They portrayed me as a worthless man to whom their sister was enslaved. At the time, I was still in love, so the prospect of divorce was not even on my radar. I just assumed we'd sort it out as we always did. During one of our disagreements, she pushed me so hard that I locked her out of the house for the first time. I just couldn't take it anymore. Naturally, she fled to her family again. Still, this time, they went a step further, taking her to the police and claiming that I had assaulted her. The entire situation devolved into chaos. My parents had to step in, and before I knew it, we were going through marriage counseling. The funny part is that it actually worked. The whole packing up and leaving routine stopped, as did her family's interference in our business. This was 5 years into our marriage, and things seemed to be returning to how they were when we first started dating, but I should have exercised more caution. I mean, anyone who could spread a false narrative about me as an abuser through her family and the police, even if they didn't accept the accusations, was someone I should have been leery of. But, as I already stated, love can cloud your judgment. Every now and then I like to go out and work from various locations. I continued to display indifference as if I didn't care about her frustrations. The idea was to create just enough emotional space so that she could focus solely on Diego. I needed her to dig herself deeper, not realizing I was 2 steps ahead the entire time. Over the next 2 weeks, I noticed Darcy getting increasingly invested with Diego. She would leave for hours, stating she was out with friends or doing work stuff. I didn't fight or challenge her. I gave her the rope, knowing she would eventually hang herself with it. I continued to monitor their chats and learned that Diego was beginning to ask her for money, large sums disguised as investments or emergencies. Darcy was initially hesitant, but after some manipulation on his part, she gave in. She began transferring funds to him in small amounts, depleting her savings. I even witnessed her take out a modest loan. I did not stop her. I simply sat back and let things happen. Then I realized she started withdrawing from our joint account. That's when I realized it was time to act. I secretly transferred most of the money from the joint account to my savings, leaving just enough for her to believe she could continue funding Diego without raising concerns. Meanwhile, I gathered every screenshot, bank statement, and chat thread I could find to document her affair and the financial mess she was causing. Eventually, she reached her breaking point. One night, she told me she wanted space to reflect on our relationship and to spend a few weeks with her family. I agreed without hesitation. After she went, I made my move. I shut her out of our accounts, denied her access to the apartment, and filed for divorce the following day. I also phoned the banks and reported all suspicious transactions she had done. According to the banks, she had to cope with the consequences of the debt she had incurred, which was all in her name. A few days later, Diego did what was expected. He ghosted her. When she attempted to contact him, his social media accounts were deleted and his phone was unplugged. She was left with nothing but a mound of debt and the knowledge that she'd been duped. Of course, Darcy attempted to return. She cried and pleaded, saying she had made a mistake and that we could rectify it. But by then, I was finished. I told her what I knew, showed her the screenshots, and saw the color drain from her face. I gave her one final look and told her she could handle Diego's mess alone. I changed my phone number, blocked her on all platforms, and moved into a new apartment. It was the last time I saw her in person. Even now, she occasionally tries to contact me through mutual friends or sends messages from strange numbers, attempting to sneak back into my life. But I am done with her for good. All that remains is petitioning for a restraining order and being free from her games. This entire event taught me one valuable lesson. Trust is everything. Once it's broken, there's no turning back. As awful as that was, I'm glad I got out when I did. Some individuals spend their entire lives with the wrong person, but not me. Not anymore. This is my conclusion. This is me leaving everything behind me and walking away for good. I felt a sense of remorse seeing her in that state, but it was brief. This was no longer about me, but about freeing myself from someone who had misled, lied, and betrayed me. She had chosen Diego over me, and now she was dealing with the consequences of her own decisions. I calmly informed her that nothing she said or did would change the fact that our marriage had ended. I offered her a pen and instructed her to sign the divorce papers. Initially, she declined. She screamed and pleaded, promising to make things right, but I wasn't buying it. When I rose to depart, she knew I wasn't kidding around. With shaking hands, she grabbed the pen and signed. The following few days were chaotic. She tried everything, calling my parents, showing up at my workplace, and even messaging our mutual friends to persuade them to interfere. But I'd already set everything in motion. I sent the signed papers to my lawyer and blacklisted her on all platforms. There was no turning back, and she knew it. Her family ultimately learned about the loans and Diego's fraud. They attempted to blame me, claiming that if I had been a better husband, Darcy would not have sought consolation elsewhere. I just chuckled. I had all the proof I needed to prove exactly what had happened, and I was not scared to use it if they pushed me any further. Darcy was severely affected by the consequences of Diego's fraud. Not only was she drowning in debt, but she also discovered from the other victims that Diego was seeing other women at the same time. She'd been only one of many targets in his complex network of falsehoods. Ultimately, she was humiliated, bankrupt, and had a damaged reputation. Meanwhile, I moved on. I moved to a new town, separated myself from the drama, and gradually reconstructed my life. It wasn't easy at first, but each day seemed lighter, as if a weight I hadn't even noticed I was carrying had been removed. Looking back, I recognized that what I had gone through was more than a betrayal. It was a lesson. A complex, messy, but essential lesson. I discovered that sometimes love isn't enough. Walking away is sometimes the best option, even if it hurts. Now, whenever I think of Darcy, I feel nothing. There is no wrath, sadness, or regret. Just relief. I'm finally free. And that was all I ever wanted. She was really concerned and called a buddy to come over right away. When her companion arrived, she realized what had transpired and packed a few belongings, eventually taking Darcy. As terrifying as it had been, it did not mean I had forgiven her. After a few days, Darcy began contacting me, and when I couldn't stand the interruptions any longer, I blocked her, but not before informing her that any information she wanted to send to me should go through my lawyer. She attempted to visit the residence, but I warned her that if she did it again, I would call the police. She probably went home after that because I started receiving calls from her family, which I also blocked. We had to go to court because she and her family refused to discuss peacefully. It was tough because in the middle of the case, it didn't appear that I would receive the better side of the split. But thankfully for me, the divorce proceeding was karma in action. First and foremost because we did not have children, thank God. Custody was not an issue. However, the financial side of things became a disaster. Marital assets are distributed evenly during divorce in most states, including mine. That does not necessarily imply 50-50, but rather what is fair. I knew Darcy had begun by diverting funds from our shared account. Because she didn't want me to suspect anything, she gradually began investing her personal resources in Diego's fictitious company projects. I made sure to present all of the proof of her expenditures during our marriage, demonstrating how she had foolishly squandered her own money, leaving her with nothing but debt. I shouldn't have to suffer for it. I had engaged an excellent and expensive lawyer, and we discussed everything: the loan she took out in her name, the money she paid to Diego, and her overall financial recklessness. The court was not sympathetic to her financial difficulties. In fact, they determined that she was entirely accountable for her own debt. She explained that Diego had manipulated her, but the court was unconcerned. It was not a criminal case, it was a divorce. In divorce court, the only thing that mattered was how the assets and debts were distributed. Thanks to my lawyer's professionalism, I could walk away without spousal support, shared debt, or debt division. On the other hand, Darcy was left to cope with the disaster she had caused. The judge ordered her to repay the debts she obtained on her own. Because her personal resources had been depleted, she was left with a mountain of debt and a destroyed credit score. No Diego, no me. What's the most excellent aspect of this? I didn't have to do anything illegal or dishonest to exact my revenge. Everything was done according to the book. I just let her dig her own grave and then ensured she couldn't crawl out, legally. She was stuck with her own lousy choices, and she could do nothing about it. After the divorce, she attempted reaching out far too many times, perhaps believing she could sweet-talk her way back into my good graces using new numbers and methods. I'd block her, and she'd contact me using a new account or phone number. That is why I will be asking for a restraining order, citing her ongoing harassment, and I'm confident that I will get it. If she tries to contact me or shows up unexpectedly, she breaches the order, creating a new legal issue. So that's how I handled it. It wasn't dramatic or violent, but deliberate, calculated, and lawful. I let Darcy's actions destroy her, and now I can move on. She's still out there, drowning in debt and looking for a guy who's long gone. And me? I'm ready to put this all behind me for good. So if you're ever in a scenario like mine, there are better solutions than Hollywood-style vengeance. Simply be clever, document everything, and let the legal system do the heavy lifting. My proactive approach to the matter, rather than succumbing to rage or drama, demonstrates a degree of maturity that not everyone has. I am pleased with my self-control. Filing for a restraining order is also a critical step to protect my tranquility and allow me to move on without constant reminders of the past. This gives me the clarity and space to focus on my future. As I begin this new chapter, I remind myself that prioritizing my personal well-being is critical. I'll take the time to rediscover what makes me happy and content, whether trying new activities, hanging out with friends, or simply having some quiet time to think. I deserve to be satisfied and construct a life free of the shackles of the past. Thank you for sticking with me on this path. If you found value in my experience or it resonated with you in any way, please like, share, and leave your opinions in the comments below. And if you haven't already, subscribe to receive updates on my latest thoughts and insights as I navigate this new chapter of my life. Your support means everything. Until next time, be careful and remember to prioritize your own peace and happiness.